Okay, hang on. That is fascinating. So, in other words, you don't mind doing the slur against Andrew over things he cares very passionately about his religion because you don't share his religion. Therefore, you can't offend him. Therefore, you can't offend him.
How is that a slur?
He said, would you use the word cannibal? You said, you wouldn't care.
That's not a slur. That's not a slur.
Hang on.
It is to him. It is to him.
A slur was what offended people.
So hang on. So Parker, you decide what. Hang on. Just to be clear, Parker, you are the slur monitor, are you? You decide what isn't a slur, and therefore you, Parker, can say what the fuck you like, as long as you have decided it's not a slur. You see the flaw in the argument.
It's all ad hoc.
Obviously, we have definitions on what slurs are. I don't know why that's a confusing thing to you. Do you have a definition? Obviously, you have a definition.
I would say saying to a Christian that he's a cannibal because of communion or whatever, I think is utterly offensive. Yeah, and a slur. But you don't, because you don't share the religion. Therefore, you, language monitor Parker, have decided it's not a slur. And so as long as you don't think it's a slur, and this is my problem with your generation, is that you're so easily offended, except when you're offending everybody else.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so every once in a while with these Piers Morgan debates, we get a substantive debate, and that's what we have going on today. We actually get into objective reality, subjective morality, and all of the like, everything in between. It's pretty good. It starts off a little bit slow, but it builds and builds and builds, and we finally get to actual substantive conversations, some pretty good discourse back and forth. Of course, this is Piers Morgan. You're going to have a little bit of circusism, if you will, if that's what you even want to call it. But before we get into all that, y'all do me a favor, smash that like button for me, subscribe if you're new around here, especially follow my regular videos. We go over politics and media manipulation and all that. Y'all sign up, become a member, help me deliver the best possible content I can deliver to you guys, because I need that help. Y'all share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. That's the best way to help me out. But without any further ado, let's get into it, y'all.
Well, Pride's always been completely astroturfed. I mean, to be honest, right from the very beginning, it's been astroturfed. It was always pumped full of government money, NGO funding. It was pumped full of corporate money. There was an article that came out, you can find in the Drudge Report, came out today from, I believe it was Daily Telegram. It was pretty interesting. They went over, a lot of the modern Trump administration and what they have done with their executive orders. A lot of companies have begun moving away from trying to kind of fund this, and it hasn't been popular for the last couple of years anyway. There's been a lot of pushback on various large corporations, companies, and NGOs for trying to pump kind of artificially these organizations. One of the things that article points out, which I tend to agree with, is that, hey, look, ultimately, when these companies are doing this, people lose trust for them. You remember there was a big thing with Target not that long ago. Anytime this comes to light, there's actually a backlash. People can kind of see that it's artificially held up. There's no reason for it. It's silly. It has never really been about gay rights. It's
what do you mean there's no reason for it? What do you mean?
It's been well, because it's always really
no reason for it, right? They're bullies like you.
Do you want me to answer?
Right?
Do you want me to answer the question or no?
Yeah, you can go ahead, and I'll explain to you why I think there's a reason after.
Okay, yeah. So there's no real reason for it. It's been about pushing sexual perversions. Never really been about anything to do with homosexuals themselves not having rights or having rights. It's never been about that. It's been about weird gay pride parades and all kinds of weird sexual stuff. It really has never been about that. And that's what the American people think. That's what they see. That's why you see companies moving away from it.
No, I don't think that's true. Look, they're gay people, like let's take you, for example. You're the reason, right? When I first talked to you, right, we were having a normal debate about, I think, morality. And then you randomly asked me, what's your, are you a homosexual?
And you were, right?
Down, right? And then
right?
Also with,
but hang on, was I right though? Was I right?
I'm not a homosexual. No, I'm married to a woman.
You said that you were bisexual. You said that you were bisexual.
Right.
That's homosexual.
Is not the same as bisexual.
There's certain ways.
Terms, but
the point is that people conduct themselves.
People like you and Jay Dyer bully LGBTQ people.
Yeah,
that's why
bullied,
it's pride, because of the kind of stigmas that you promote.
Okay, so here's the thing that's so funny about this is, like, if both me and Jay Dyer, both of us assumed that you were a homosexual, and both of us were right. That's what's so funny about it.
Again,
we both assumed you were gay, and we were both correct that you were gay.
Andrew, is there anything wrong with him being gay? Is there anything wrong with him being gay?
There's a problem with you guys supporting NGO-funded kind of astroturf program to promote rights, which aren't even about promoting rights.
Was that a response to what he just said?
The whole ordeal here is, well, what's the prompt, Parker? The prompt is about pride. And so you're supporting an astroturfed, completely astroturf NGO-funded thing. It has nothing to do with gay rights at all. And people don't like it, Parker. They don't like it, Parker.
Well, Parker,
So
I would ask Parker this. Look, I mean, look, Andrew, you said some things which I completely disagree with about this issue. You said women will never truly understand why men find homosexuality so depraved. We don't think there's a problem there. We know there's a problem there. I'm a man. I don't find homosexuality remotely depraved. I think people's sexuality is what it is. So I don't agree with you with some of the statements you've made. However, Parker, I am increasingly bemused why, when there are so many important things in the world to worry about, we devote a whole month to gay pride. Why do we?
There are plenty of things that we specifically have months for to celebrate that I think are incredibly important. This, in this specific example, is incredibly important because of the dehumanization and the bigotry espoused specifically by people like Jay Dyer and Andrew Wilson, and explicitly kicking people off of their panels because they're gay, right, or because they're homosexual, which I think is incredibly ridiculous.
But you know, right? As well as I do, Parker,
can I please finish?
If you compare it, look, well, hang on. I would say, if you go back 35, 40 years, I would completely agree with you. But the idea that that is still the case today, I just don't feel it. Do you? I mean, certainly young people in particular do not. It's just moved on.
Respectfully, how would you know as a straight person? Like, how would you? Do you experience it?
Look, why are you assuming my sexuality?
I want to talk about Piers. I want to talk about my experience when I went viral. Piers, when I went viral, right? I had people message, calling me the F slur, saying I had a gay lisp, right? When I'm married to a woman, right? If I'm not even a homosexual, and if people are bullying me for that, I can't imagine what actual homosexuals have to go through. So,
what is, if you don't mind me asking, given it's now been sort of raised, and I'm not quite sure, are you straight? Are you bisexual? What's the deal?
I'm bisexual. I've been married to a woman happily for 5 years, and we're monogamous.
Okay. All right.
Two gaytheists. I want to chime in. We have two gaytheists on the panel that have said that I bullied them.
Like this kind of behavior. Look at this behavior.
That's called a joke. That's called a joke, sensitive man.
So funny, Jay Dyer.
Oh my God, look at this behavior.
This behavior is out of control.
You are two gaytheists.
It's too much bad behavior.
Wait, I'm sorry. Hold on. Are you guys Christians? I thought we're supposed to be loving to thy neighbor.
Well, the only thing also includes telling you when it's wrong.
Don't you love trans people, Parker? You said that you would date a trans person. Remember that? Or
and what's wrong with that?
I think that
what's wrong with that?
I guess you are more loving than me than Parker. I wouldn't date a trans person.
Okay, is that supposed to be like a critique of me?
So the problem is that these guys can't give an account
Christians. I called for you as Christians to be loving.
All they've talked about is what's right.
You don't know what loving means. You don't even know what that means.
Let's not talk over each other because no one can ever hear. Jay.
See, that's something I can't stand when they try to throw that argument out there. Aren't you Christian? Aren't you supposed to love everybody? Yeah, we do. We just don't have to embrace their vices. We don't have to celebrate a sin, for goodness sakes. Christians don't like that. They find it very, very highly offensive, if you will. And that's the whole problem with Pride Month. You guys, you're getting out there, you're complaining about being bullied, and then you put this out there on display for everybody to see, which is depraved. There's no argument against that it's not depraved. Have you seen some of the pride parades, for crying out loud? There's men engaging in sexual activity in the public with kids around. This is highly offensive. This is also criminal in many, many places. This is why we have a problem with it. And they're talking about being bullied, and then they put it out there on display. It's just fascinating, the mind of some of these people. But let's keep going, because this thing is going to ramp up.
Yeah. So earlier in the first section, we talked about Peterson. We were talking about what was good for men.
Yeah.
And whether Tate was good or Peterson was good. And now we're talking about ethics in the sexual domain, which there's no basis in their worldview for anything to be morally, objectively right or wrong, other than their personal preferences. So if there's nothing objectively wrong, there's no reason why bigotry is wrong. Why is bigotry wrong?
Well, support your claim. Don't run from your claim. Support it. Right? You're saying we as atheists have no basis of morality. Support that.
Yeah. No epistemic basis for getting an ought from an is.
Yeah, that's a claim. Okay. Well, you're saying atheists
No, it's an argument. It's a famous argument.
Right? You're saying that atheists can't account for morality. So what's the argument for that?
You can't get an ought from an is the argument. Back to Hume.
It looks like you don't know what an argument is. Come on, reason. Try to go from one line of reasoning to another. Do you know what an argument is?
You cannot get an ought from an is. You're an atheist. In a materialistic worldview, there's no ought.
What does that have to do with atheism?
In a materialistic, atheistic worldview, there are no oughts.
First of all, I'm not a materialist.
You don't know the basic problem of ought from is?
That's just another claim. That's just another claim.
Not a claim, it's an argument. It's a famous historical.
Look,
you don't know the difference between a claim and an argument.
Claim, you can't defend it.
It's an argument. It goes back to David Hume.
Can you tell us what an argument is?
You didn't even know that.
Right?
You don't know the difference between.
Look what just happened. Look what just happened. This guy said.
What just happened is that you didn't know the difference between an argument and a claim.
Why are you over talking to me? Why are you scared? Let me talk. Right? You just claimed that atheists don't have a foundation of morality. I asked you to defend it, and then you said you can't get an ought from an is. What the heck?
That's the argument. That's
where are you going to get from that premise, right? You can't derive that.
It's an argument. It's not a premise. It goes back to David Hume. You just didn't know that.
Okay, can we look? I think we're moving slightly off topic.
Yeah, so that young kid right there, Danny, I believe his name is, doesn't understand what an argument is clearly, because that is an argument that atheists do not have a basis for morality, right? You ask him, that's all you got to do is ask, where does your morality derive from? And it will always resort back to like law or something like that, which law derives their basis of morality from Christians, from Christianity, or some sort of religion, some sort of theistic philosophy, something of that nature. That's where morality derives from. So as an atheist, there is no basis for morality. They can't find any sort of origin as to where their morality comes from. They just make it up as they go. But let's keep going.
Again, with this, if you don't go along with the Pride Month stuff, then somehow you must be homophobic, is the kind of way this all seems to work. And I don't like that. I don't understand why we have to have any more these enforced things where everywhere you go for a whole month, everything's pride. Why? Why can't everyone just get on with their lives?
Yeah, so like a way that I would respond to this is by saying that because of the bigotry and dehumanization that exists in our society, it's important to have these things for acceptance to decrease the level of bullying that exists in our society targeted towards the LGBTQ plus community. Now, no one's saying that you have to go to Pride, Piers. No one's saying that you have to involve yourself with Pride. When I go outside, I live in Los Angeles, I don't see rainbow flags everywhere. So I'm confused what you're talking about.
In Los Angeles?
You walk down the street and just,
you must be joking, but you can barely move in Los Angeles. I've got a house in Beverly Hills. You might as well put a Pride flag over the whole place.
I'm sorry. I've been to those areas. Pride flags aren't everywhere. And when you live in Beverly Hills, right, that's specifically like not even right next to downtown. So that's where most of the rainbow flags would be. If you've actually been to LA recently.
Here's my serious point to you. If you actually want to do something constructive for, say, the trans community, for example, wandering around with LGBTQ plus, and no one can ever remember now how many letters and digits there are on these.
You just said it.
It gets bigger and bigger. And I've seen one with 2 in it and all sorts of stuff, a 2-spirit, whatever. It's all.
All it is IA plus.
Yeah, I know, but then there's 2 and everything. It gets ridiculous, right? And this is the problem with these things. It's never ending. It's like there were 2 genders, then there were 10, then there were 80, then there were 100. All of it's nonsense to me. However,
it wasn't like
however,
that,
if you want to think that, it's a free world. Here's my point. If you actually want to make a constructive difference to, say, the trans community and trans rights and protect trans people, then the absolute worst way to go about that is the way that the trans lobby has tried to do it, by eroding women's rights in things like women's sport. That has exposed so many trans people to mockery, abuse, and the rest of it. And I would say that rather than spending all this time and effort and money on flags in Pride Month, what about just actually getting people together to understand that eroding women's rights is the worst possible thing to promote trans rights? Would you accept that?
Okay, so then if we were going to be talking about eroding women's rights, we'd have to talk about people that, someone like Andrew Wilson supports, like Donald Trump, who was held civilly liable for sexually abusing a woman, who bragged about
hang on, let's stick to my question. Don't bring Trump into it.
I promise you I'm making a point relative to this.
Right.
He bragged about walking...
Smoky man bad. Smoky man bad.
You're very childish. He bragged about walking
all you can do is focus on me. You can't even answer to his question, dude. He's just.
I'm answering it right now. You're cutting me off.
But Smoky man bad.
You're cutting me off. I'm trying to answer it right now. Respectfully, I'm trying to answer it right now, but you're not allowing me to.
Okay, well, answer without distracting into Trump and stuff. Just answer the question.
Well, I'm giving an explanation, right? So he bragged about walking into the changing rooms of girls in Miss USA because he quote unquote owns the place to inspect them without
forget
consent.
Trump. Forget Trump.
I promise you I'm making a point here. Would you let me
You have to
finish,
get to the
please?
point a bit quicker. Come on.
I promise you I am. I've had 15 seconds. Okay, so specifically, right, people like Andrew Wilson do not call that type of stuff out when it's explicitly harmful towards women's rights.
You're playing whataboutery. I'm not interested in whataboutery. Because I haven't done that. So as somebody like me, talk to me, Parker, talk to me, right? As somebody who has always supported...
I was going to refer to trans people.
As someone who's always supported trans rights, trans people's rights...
disingenuous.
Well, I have always supported trans people's rights to fairness, equality, and safety. Right to the point that it began to erode into women's rights to the same thing. And that's my point to you. Why waste all this time, effort, and money on virtue signaling for Pride Month when in fact there's a real problem going on which remains unresolved because too many people on the left and too many young people go along with this absolute farce of trans athletes in women's sport, which exposes trans people around the world to extra mockery and abuse.
But you'll condemn the mockery and abuse from people like Jay Dyer, and these are the mockers.
Ad hominem.
Condemn that.
Well, I'm saying you're going to get the mockery when there is something so obviously grotesquely unfair.
Can I respond?
Parker, you got your hand up very politely, so answer me without mentioning Donald Trump or Andrew Wilson.
Yeah, okay. So I can't mention the person on the panel, but specifically in terms of trans people are not specifically going to be harmful towards women in these particular spaces, given that they've met the conditions of multiple years of HRT.
Have you been okay, sorry. Hang on.
Please, let me finish.
Parker, you can't make it. Parker, literally, as you've said this, today, it's been revealed.
I'm finishing, Piers.
Today,
Piers, I'm trying to
wait a minute.
I'm trying to explain, Piers.
You talked about safety. Literally today, the Algerian gold medal winner in the Paris Olympics women's boxing has been revealed to be a man who should never have been competing.
Piers, can I speak?
That's why.
You know how people feel when they're on your panels and you mute them.
Can I speak without interruption, please?
All right, answer.
I've been incredibly nice on this panel. I would love to be able to speak without interruption. Is that okay, Piers?
Yes, but answer my question.
Yeah, I was trying to answer the question. You cut me off. So specifically, I don't think trans people in these spaces would be harmful after multiple years of HRT and or not going through a male puberty, as I've seen no good evidence from any scientific studies that indicate that there would be an unfair biological advantage at that point.
What are you talking about, man?
Listen. I'm still explaining.
Parker, you're talking complete gibberish,
man. Can I please finish?
Imam Khalif has literally just been exposed as a biological male who won Olympic gold in women's boxing and beat up an Italian woman, so badly she quit in 43 seconds and said she thought she was going to die in the ring. So the whole argument you just put forward is literally disproved by a news story today. That's the point I was making to you. Of course it's dangerous. When you allow biological men to get in a boxing ring and beat up women, it is dangerous.
Piers, has that person been through multiple years of HRT?
I don't know. I don't care.
Then they haven't met my set of criteria. So how is that a critique of my worldview if they haven't met the set of criteria that I mentioned? Can I please finish? Can I please mention? Right. So again, let me please finish. Right. I am saying what if they meet this set of criteria, then they can play. And there's nothing unfair biologically speaking that you can identify.
This is where you're so deluded. You're so deluded because even if you have all the treatment, you still retain the body mass, the muscle mass, the lung capacity. You retain all the biological advantages of being born a man.
Not after multiple years of HRT. Not after multiple years of HRT.
Yes, you do.
Wait, do you want to bet, Piers? Piers, put money on it. You said you retain every biological advantage.
Muscle mass.
You have gone through multiple years of HRT.
Lung capacity.
You don't think muscle mass
you want to bet your entire
goes
savings of your entire life
let's
that
bet
I'm right and you're wrong?
Piers, let's bet $1,000 right now that there are lower biological advantages that would specifically exist given that someone goes through multiple years of HRT, right, relative to estrogen.
No, you're missing my point.
Take that bet.
No, you're missing my point.
Are you going to accept the bet? Yes or no?
You can have all the HRT treatment you like.
Piers.
You can have all the testosterone. But hang on.
He's not going to accept it.
Let me answer. I'll tell you the bet I'll make. If you want to bet the $1,000, that if you go through testosterone reduction treatment and the rest of it, that you come out of it with a reduced muscle mass or lung capacity or the other things that give men an advantage, take that bet for me.
Yeah. So I will bet after multiple years of HRT, specifically relating to estrogen, right, there is a reduction in muscle mass. You want to take that bet, Piers?
It's bullshit. Andrew Wilson.
Okay, let's take that bet. You want to take it, yes or no?
Andrew Wilson.
Yes or no? Do you want to take the bet?
I'm letting Andrew respond to you.
See, this from him is all performative. He's right about that. Yeah, you will get a slight reduction in muscle mass, lung capacity, bone. You won't get a reduction in bone density, for crying out loud, but he's somewhat right. But that obfuscates the point here, right? The point is they're still going to have an advantage. Plus, getting back to the crux of the entire position on this, right, is they have to undergo this treatment before puberty, for crying out loud, and that's the crux of the problem, because a child does not know if they're going to be a man or blah, 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 blah. They don't know those things. Their minds are still developing, for goodness sakes, and we try to protect children from life-changing decisions that they may regret in the future. We do everything we can to protect our children, and that decision right there, you can't come back from that. You're going to sterilize that child, and that's the problem. We have major societal problems with this, right? Most people, they don't think that way. They don't think you can just change your biology, for crying out loud. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to do that, right? The desistance rates for children, for quote-unquote trans children, are anywhere, like the studies show, anywhere from 70% to 90%, which means basically that if a child comes out and says they want to identify as the opposite sex, and you do nothing and you affirm their actual gender, right, which that's get obfuscated all the time too, but you affirm their actual gender and say, no, you're not this, after a little while they will just go on to be a normal child. No problems there. But if you affirm their delusion, then you're putting them into this box where they have a 45% suicidality rate. Well, that's attempts. So we don't want to put children into this box, and that's the problem. Most adults say, hey, do what you want to do. Be free. You want to change? You want to try to change your biology? Go right ahead. You'll never be successful, but go ahead and try. You're an adult. You can do what you want. But this is about protecting children. I know Piers is talking about protecting women. That's a whole separate argument. But the crux of his whole argument here is that we have to do this at an early stage before puberty. And that's just not going to happen, my guy. Society will never agree to that. That is never going to be a thing. So this whole argument is null and void. Let's keep going.
Let me bring in Danny. Let Danny have a say.
Yeah, right. I want to highlight that what the corporations do, right? I might agree with you. Some of them sell out for pride, right? They, it's marketable. I might agree with you, but pride is way more than just what the corporations do. It's how people, identify with their sexuality and, kind of anti-bullying agenda. That's very important and central to pride. Whatever the corporations do, if they sell out, they sell out. But you can still have pride, whatever they do.
Yeah, you can have pride, but why do you have to have
Danny, though?
Why do you have to have all the commercialization behind it?
It's not organic, Danny. This is not
anti-bullying is inherently
organically. This is not organically people coming together anymore to force this. This is a bunch of NGOs.
Andrew,
which go to corporations
if you were actually Christian,
this.
you would be in support of pride. If you were actually Christian, you'd be in support of pride because you'd be okay with accepting people.
Is there a cardinal sin called
that's what
pride?
Jesus said.
Is there a cardinal sin called pride?
Wait, it's not pride in a literal sense. It's pride specifically in the sense
of actually a very good point. Pride is a sin.
Pride.
Why are you celebrating sin?
It's not.
Yeah, you're celebrating sin. Literally, what are you talking about?
You're misunderstanding. You're misunderstanding. It's not pride in a literal sense. It's pride in the sense specifically where we're accepting people specifically for being gay, right? For being trans. And that's exactly what
proud of it.
Wait, Christianity doesn't tell you to do that.
Right?
Christianity tells you to love everyone and tells you to accept people who are human beings made in the image of God.
It also talks about boundaries and limitations. You have to have a basis for virtue versus vice. Christianity is a virtue vice ethic, and your whole ethos is to defend your own personal vices because your ethics are all purely subjective. You have no basis for rights other than what you say is the case.
Jay, are you proud to be a Christian?
Sure.
Oh, that's a sin.
That's an equivocation. I didn't make the argument. I didn't make the argument. That's an equivocation.
We're not talking about the cardinal sin.
What's an equivocation fallacy?
We're talking about the sense of pride that matters, to your identity, who you are, Christian.
I said virtue vice ethic, and you used an argument from equivocation. It's two different uses of the word.
No, you're equivocating. Wait, that's what you brought up the cardinal sin.
No. Yes, you are. I didn't say that pride is the sin that is.
Respectfully, wasn't that exactly what you guys were doing when I said that pride wasn't used in a literal sense, but then you guys equivocated and said that we were.
I didn't make that argument. Andrew made that argument. I said you don't have a basis for virtue or vice.
So Andrew made a mistake. So Andrew made a mistake.
I said you don't have a basis for virtue or vice.
We were basing this around the idea that Parker said. What Parker said specifically here was, well, wait a second. If you're a Christian, you should be all about this. And it's like, no, not really. And you haven't really demonstrated how. Why, Parker? Why is it that we need to support homosexuality as Christians, Parker? Tell us why.
Well, I was saying that you should be loving of thy neighbor as you're referencing specifically people, right? Human beings, right? If you're referencing
why does that mean we have to support homosexuality? Why do we have to support homosexuality?
I'm saying that you have to be accepting of people who are homosexual.
Why do we need to support homosexuality, Parker?
Okay, we're not saying you need to support like engaging in gay intercourse. We're saying that you need to support people who are gay as they are people created in the image of God.
Why do we need to support them? Why do we need to support them in things that we consider sinful? You want us to support sin?
Wait, I'm not saying that you should necessarily support sin. I'm saying you're supporting the person who engages in sin the same way you're a sinner, and that you engage in sin, yet you should be supported.
So when homosexuals come to the church and they reject homosexuality, they're no longer acting in that way. They are accepted.
They're not rejected.
What are you talking about?
Wait, by the way, nothing in the Bible says that being.
So there's a vice virtue ethic that they're not understanding. It's not an identity. It's a vice.
See, what Parker wants right here is for Christians to celebrate pride and celebrate LGBTQ, and we're not going to do that. They say, oh, you're not Christian, you're not virtuous because you don't like this. You think it's a sin, blah, blah, blah. You should support LGBTQ. We do by telling them you're sinners. You are sinning. Yeah, we don't celebrate sin. I'm sorry. We support people who do sin, and we try to stop them, prevent them from engaging in said vice. That's what the church does. That is a support system telling you you're going down the wrong path and you don't need to be. This is what Christians do. We help each other through this. We do not support delusions. We do not assist them with sinning, for crying out loud. It's a basic philosophical misunderstanding of what Christianity represents. They think, oh, well, you should just love everybody, and they just go right along with that delusion. I'm sorry. No, we're not going to engage in fallacy, for crying out loud. We're going to tell you that this is a sin, this is what we believe, and you shouldn't engage in this. This doesn't mean that we don't accept you as a human being. This doesn't mean that we don't love you as a human being. But we see there's a problem here. We see that our beliefs, you don't have to believe it, but you're not going to force us into your ideology, for crying out loud. We're not going to engage in support on something that is antithetical to our beliefs, for goodness sakes. That's just not right for us, right? Leave it alone if you want. Hey, don't bother us, we won't bother you type of thing. But we're not going to engage, especially in sophistry, which is essentially what they're doing here.
I champion all the comedians.
But that became something that was taboo in society because it was deemed to be very offensive to black people. The R word,
but I don't think it is.
The use of the R word is deemed to be very offensive to people who are genuinely mentally impaired. And they don't like it.
He's making a soy face, like he's like freaking out over there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You just said it's justified
there's a difference
for white people
between
to say the N-word?
and what's wrong, morally wrong. I don't equate the two.
All right,
Taboos are not
Parker,
equated
your
to
response.
morally wrong.
So here's my question. Do you think that Jesus would say the N-word, and do you think Jesus would say the R slur?
Jesus does say jokes and slurs in the Gospels, yes. He talks about...
So Jesus would say the R slur in the N-word?
equivalents in his day.
So Jesus would say the N-word and the R slur?
He calls people
the same thing as the N-word and the R slur.
reference to you guys as vice.
Parker, do people in your friendship group ever use the R word?
No, never.
It's just a taboo word.
Yes, I think it's incredibly wrong to use. You shouldn't use it.
People in your friend group use the N-word.
And out of interest, Parker, what is your rationale personally for not using it?
I think it's incredibly harmful. In the same way that we don't use other sorts of slurs because they're harmful, I think that we shouldn't use this word because it's harmful.
Hurt my feelings, should you not argue?
So no, specifically, we're saying it meets a threshold of harm, right?
Whose
because
threshold?
the R slur and the
whose threshold?
My threshold. My
Your
threshold.
So it's
is arbitrary.
subjective. That's a subjective argument. Thank you. So it's only your personal subjective taste.
We're obviously we're
if
talking
it's
about
your
under
personal
my
subjective
Can I
taste, then
please
it can
finish?
also be
Can I
mine.
please finish?
Okay, well then,
That's
Parker,
why
it doesn't reach our
it's a bad
threshold,
argument.
Parker.
All right,
It
Andrew.
doesn't reach our
fine. That
threshold,
would be,
Parker.
I understand, Andrew. That would be your perspective on the matter. But given my perspective, I would say that meets my threshold. Are you saying it's okay to use the N-word, Andrew?
And it's subjective, and it doesn't work as an argument.
Wait,
Andrew,
why
Andrew,
do you
Andrew,
think people that,
Andrew,
wait, I
Andrew,
have to ask you,
hold
why
on,
do
hold
you think
Yeah. Parker. Is it ever okay to use the word retard?
No. Is it okay for you to use the N-word?
Is it even okay to use the word retard to reference the word retard?
I think it's wrong to use it in general. Can you please use?
Can you answer my question, and then I'll answer yours? I promise.
I said it's wrong.
Is it okay to
wrong.
refer to the word retard if you're explaining the word retard?
Say arsler.
So you can't. Okay, so you can't even use. So just the word itself. Okay, so here's the thing that's so funny about this, right? It's like ultimately when we say retarded. Yeah. So I wouldn't use the N-word. Here's why. When I say that if somebody says the N-word, what ends up ultimately happening, there's not really too much in the way of equivocation there. Retard is not actually referring to retarded people, though. Basically, ever. Nobody ever says it, Parker, to refer to somebody who's actually retarded.
That doesn't change it. Wait, hold up. If you're using the N-word to refer to a white person, it's still wrong. Would you use the N-word to refer to a white person?
I mean, in some circumstances, I think that you can use it in a comedic sense. That's hilarious. Sure.
You think white people using the N-word is okay in any circumstance?
Yeah, comedic senses especially. I think it's fine.
That's disgusting as fuck. You do it.
Oh my God! Is that an argument?
Basis.
Is that an argument, Parker?
Wait, me calling something disgusting because I think it goes against my moral intuition?
You think it's disgusting? Okay, right. Homosexuality is disgusting because it goes against my moral intuition.
Let me bring in Danny.
So something they're just unwilling to admit that words are subjective, right? And I make this argument all the time. Like if I say, take for instance, if I say, I got to go drop a deuce. What's the problem with that? Nobody would bat a freaking eyelid. But in some cases, if I say, hey, I got to go take a shit, some people would be like, oh my God, you just cussed. Subjection there. That is subjectively offensive to somebody and objectively not offensive to other people. And that's something that they don't get. But that's going to be brought to light here quite quickly by their own argument. Those two, Parker and Danny, absolutely destroy themselves here in the next, maybe not the next clip, but maybe the clip after that, I believe. One of those two, but it's going to be beautiful. But once again, getting back to the topic here, like, words are just words. If you're going to be offended, my advice to anybody out there that would be offended by the use of retarded or nigga or anything like that would be offended. Context matters. Did I use the word in a harmful way? No, I didn't. Did I just blank that word out because of the YouTube algorithm? Yes, I sure did. It doesn't stop me from saying it in reality. Like I said, I've used that word before in music. Nobody bats a freaking eyelid.
What do? It's like this, like that. What? And like that. Better bring your fucking baseball bat. That's right. Hey, we stay ready up. Put on your gloves, nigga. That's right. Yeah. Well, let's get look. All them haters gonna hate me now.
Yeah, just like that. Run that clip again if you didn't hear it, but let's keep going.
Honestly, I want you guys to answer me fucking honestly. Does the word retard actually offend you?
Yes. I think it's fucked up for you to use. I've been very clear.
Does it actually offend you, Danny, when somebody says the word retard?
Yeah, it does.
So with Zach
especially in public
Galifianakis,
places and professional places.
So Zach Galifianakis does some when he does comedy and he does a movie and he makes a joke and says retort. Is that also bad?
I'm confused the context of what you're referencing. Is he specifically trying to refer to the
so
arsler? If he is, then
matters. Yes. So now the context
he's trying to allude to the word retard.
I don't. Okay, then yes, that's wrong.
Yes, it's wrong.
I thought you were saying like someone. I thought you were.
That references another word now is wrong, like moron.
So specifically, in terms of the one I thought you were referencing, like someone responding to an argument. I thought it's the particular term that you were using.
Zach Galifianakis in a comedy movie saying retort as a joke instead of retard.
So if your friend
I think that's incredibly fucked up to use.
Okay, so now also any word that refers to the word retard is now wrong, like moron.
I think if you're intentionally specifically trying to use a word right in place specifically of the arsler, specifically as to create the same type of outcome as the arsler.
So any word that could refer to that
particular intention, I think that particular intention would.
So you can't say the word moron. So now you
can't say the word moron.
You don't necessarily have that intention. It doesn't meet the particular threshold of harm as well.
Spiraling into insanity because
that's not. I gave two conditions to separate it. I gave two conditions. Wait, it being subjective is not a critique.
Your conditions are arbitrary.
Wait. It being subjective is not a critique. That's not a critique against the view.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
No, it's not. How is that a critique?
Yes, it is. If something is purely subjective, then I can come with all the same claims with all the same force, and there's no way to resolve the two. That's why purely subjective arguments fail.
Wait, there not being a resolution, particularly between the moral disagreement of me and you, isn't a critique particularly of my perspective.
Then you can't say anything is morally wrong. There's no ought from an is.
Wait, I can say something is morally wrong under my perspective. You're misunderstanding subjective morality.
You're not giving
you
I have a question. Tell me why it's wrong morally, objectively, if I can also counter it.
Can I ask you this question? Do you think that morality is true dependent upon God's stance or independent of God's stance?
Ultimately, it's grounded in God.
Okay, so it's subjective.
God is a subject. Yeah, God is a subject.
No, that's not a subjective argument. The argument.
Wait, God is a
the argument is that it's objective.
God's
the fact that a person makes an argument doesn't make the argument subjective. Your argument is pure subjectivism.
Is God a
subject? Two different things. It's a category error.
Is God a subject?
How's that a category error?
It's two different categories. A subjective argument
for
ethics
we're two different people too, right?
Different than a person who's a subject making an argument. Those are two different.
The point is that God is a subject; He's not an object, right? We're subjects, right? We understand morality in terms of God. In fact,
you're equivocating again.
Look, can we bring this back to the point?
No, you want to run away?
No, you can't.
Wait, God.
See, this is where those two kids don't understand God at all. God is objective. He's not subjective, for crying out loud. We just use pronouns and say he, she. He's not a he or a she. He is God. Sorry, that's the only way I can describe God. God is objective reality. God is where all morality, for crying out loud, God is where reality derives from. So everything resorts back to God, to that objective reality. That is God. I don't know what they're trying to argue here, that God is subjective, right? No, I'm sorry. It's not subjective at all, because if you don't believe in God, that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. I can't prove that God exists. And this whole idea, by the way, of that, God is some man riding on a cloud through the sky with a bolt of lightning in his hand is just childish and ridiculous, right? God created the universe, so that is a hyperdimensional being outside of our reality. How do we expect to comprehend or prove the existence of a higher dimensional being? Somebody do that down in the comment section, please. How can we prove the existence of that? You can't. You can't disprove it, so there's no argument there. It's what do you believe? And define belief, by the way. I just love these arguments, though, but let's keep going because this gets pretty good.
Not an object, right? We're subjects, right? We understand morality in terms of God. In fact,
you're equivocating again.
Look, can we bring this back to the point here?
No, you want to run away.
No, you can't.
Wait, God having his particular view on morality is no different than me having my view because we're both subjects.
The argument is that it's an objective
What is it, Jay? What is the
morality.
subject? Jay, what is the subject?
You're equivocating on the fact that a subject is making an argument versus the argument being subjective.
No, you said
that's a philosophical category error.
Jay,
this is like talking to children.
I asked you.
It's a category error, you idiot.
I gave you the youth throw dilemma. I asked you if it's true dependent upon a stance or independent of a stance. You said it's dependent upon God's stance. That's subjective by definition.
I said that the argument for Christian ethics is not a subjectivist ethic. And because God is a subject, it doesn't make the system subjective. That's an equivocation.
What do you think subjective means, Jay? What does subjective mean? What does subjective
Purely
mean?
relative to the individual.
Okay, is God an individual?
True dependent upon a stance.
Is God an individual?
That doesn't mean that the ethic is subjective. It's an objective ethic. You're just rephrasing. You're substituting the word individual for subject.
I'm asking you if God is an individual. Yes or no, Howard?
That doesn't mean that the ethics is subjective.
Yes or no? Who's running now?
It's an epistemological argument that's different.
Let me bring Andrew. Andrew, you wanted to get in here.
Jay's getting cooked, so he's got to get him out. Jay's getting cooked.
You're making a dumb mistake of language.
Hang on. Let Andrew come in, please.
Yeah. So I mean, this is kind of obfuscating from the point. What does any of that have to do with the point of retard? So, and you being offended by the word. Can you hang on? I'm talking to Parker, not you, Danny. Calm down.
Wait, you've been cutting people off this whole time.
I don't understand. I don't understand, Parker. When a friend of yours comes over and he says something to you, like you're in private, and he's like, "Hey, hand me that," and he tosses it and you miss it, and he goes, "You retard." you literally stop the kind. You go, don't say that. It's very offensive. Do you say that? It's very offensive. I really don't like it when you say. Do you dress him down, Parker? If you have someone who calls you a retard in a friendly way.
I'm sorry. My mic cut out, so I couldn't hear you.
I want to post something to Andrew.
If you have a friend, shut up, Danny. If you have a friend, Parker, and your buddy comes over and he like tosses you something and you drop it and he's like, you retard. You dress him down? Do you go, I can't believe it. You called me a retard. Why?
Yes.
That's hurting other people's feelings. But who's around Parker? Who's around to be Parker? Who's around to be offended except you? Who's around to be offended but you?
That doesn't change whether or not I think it's wrong.
Yeah, so I don't understand.
Let Danny respond. Danny?
I want to give Andrew a hypothetical. Suppose there's this unknown society where if you show this signal, everyone's extremely offended. They'll get very angry, like people get angry at typical slurs like the N-word, right? Would you go around just doing this?
Logic? The Vulcan sign for logic.
Do you understand the hypothetical?
What are you posing a hypothetical?
So imagine you go to a
can you use really small words, bro?
Okay, imagine a hypothetical, right, where you're going to a society you don't know about, but all you know is if you do this.
I'm imagining a hypothetical.
Let me finish. You didn't understand hypothetical, so I'm having to repeat it. So let me finish.
Yeah, repeat it. Use small words.
Let's say this signal is extremely offensive in that society, really offends people. Would you go around just doing this to troll people, or would you not do it?
I would definitely tell them to live long and prosper, bro.
Okay, you're just not engaging in the hypothetical. You're not a serious person.
What do you mean? That is serious.
What I'm trying to illustrate is that if a term really offends a friend of someone, right, or a family member or something like that, why would you use the term but to piss them off?
The trouble is that we've got to a place in our society where the language police are now so out of control that we can't even use the word in hospitals, mother, because somebody who is a trans man who's having a baby objects to the word mother. And that's the problem with language police, is that if there's no natural societal limitation to it, it's never ending. Somebody somewhere will always be offended by a word somewhere. And at the moment in society, it's like there are 1,000 words that upset people. That's my problem with it.
And Danny, what do you do in that same hypothetical? Let me half the people mean it a different way.
Parker, you wanted to respond to that?
No, I want to respond to this particular point. Christians get oftentimes very angry about specific terms you use, whether it be in the context of their particular beliefs, whether it be transubstantiation, calling them a cannibal specifically under their view, if it is the case that they think it's the actual like body and blood of Christ that they're eating specifically within and drinking within communion, right? That us calling them a cannibal, they get really, really angry with. Or us blaspheming the Holy Spirit, they get really angry with.
And you don't seem to care about doing that, do you?
They're No, I don't. They're the tone police.
Yeah, right.
You guys don't talk about that. No, it's not, because I'm not a Christian. I don't hold those perspectives.
Yeah, but hang
on. That's okay. Hang on. That is fascinating. So, in other words, you don't mind doing the slur against Andrew over things he cares very passionately about religion because you don't share his religion. Therefore, you can't offend him. Therefore, you can't offend him.
How is that a slur?
He said, would you use the word cannibal? You said, you wouldn't care.
That's not a slur. That's not a slur.
Hang on.
It is to him. It is to him.
A slur was what offended people.
So hang on. So Parker, you decide what. Hang on. Just to be clear, Parker, you are the slur monitor, are you? You decide what isn't a slur, and therefore you, Parker, can say what the fuck you like, long as you have decided it's not a slur. You see the flaw in the argument.
It's all ad hoc.
Obviously, we have definitions on what slurs are. I don't know why that's a confusing thing to you. Do you have a definition? Obviously, you have a definition.
I would say saying to a Christian that he's a cannibal because of communion or whatever, I think is utterly offensive. Yeah, and a slur. But you don't, because you don't share the religion. Therefore, you, language monitor Parker, have decided it's not a slur. And so as long as you don't think it's a slur, and this is my problem with your generation, is that you're so easily offended, except when you're offending everybody else.
Wait, if it genuinely is the case that it leads to a particular level of harm that I would say meets my particular threshold of harm, I would say we shouldn't use that term. All I was doing is describing specifically there are terms and words Christians think are very harmful to them.
Well, cannibalism is a criminal offense.
Listen.
Well, Parker, there's a lot more Christians than there are.
Cannibalism is a crime. You're accusing it of him of being a criminal.
No, actually, you're equivocating because I'm using their own definition of the term cannibal specifically because it is the case that you're equivocating because that's not. I don't think it's actually like the body and blood of Christ. So they didn't actually, in a meaningful sense, violate any laws. Does that make sense?
And I don't think I'm actually calling somebody mentally, slow when I say retard either, Parker. So what?
It's still.
So now they reluctantly find themselves on the other side of the argument, making the same argument that the other two guys were making. This is just so fascinating to me. Subjective reality. You can't argue subjective reality. You'll never get to a resolution. There'll never be any sort of end to the conflict. It'll continue going all day long. So what is the resolution? As a matter of fact, I said that because I'm posing a hypothetical here. What is the resolution? What is the resolution? The resolution is, once again, my advice from earlier, if you find offense with something, then be offended. That's it. Be offended. Voice your opinion. Voice your objection. But you can't try to force legislation on people. And that's what the LGBTQ community is trying to do with Pride Month and all that other stuff. They're trying to force us to engage with their nonsense, and we don't want to engage with that. We find that offensive, highly offensive in some cases. Some people just get sick to their stomach when they see, two men in a pride parade engaging in sexual activities in front of children, in front of everybody, in front of the world, for crying out loud. They get offended, highly offended by that. So we are not putting our traditional values on display like that for you guys. That is not what Christians do, for goodness sakes. We go to a church, we celebrate in the church, and that's pretty much it. Right now I'm sure that there are situations we could get into where it does fall outside the church and blah, 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 blah. But it is not an entire month of putting it in your face and trying to force other people to come to Christianity and, hey, engage in our beliefs. No, we don't do that. We do not do that. They're engaging in a lot of sophistry in this whole thing, making up arguments. They don't understand what God is, for goodness sakes. I can't stand that idea. It's just so ridiculously childish of people to think, oh, well, you believe there's a man riding on a cloud through the sky with a lightning bolt and he just smites people all day long? No, that's not what God is. Do you understand what dimensions are? Like dimensions, like the first dimension, second and third dimensions. We got a fourth dimension, that is time. We move through times. We hypothesize that there are higher dimensions than that. And that's where Christianity comes in. That's where we believe God created the universe. So he would be not of this universe. He is the universe. He is outside the universe. You cannot say he is a subject. He is objective reality incarnate, for crying out loud. And once again, you don't have to believe that for it to be true. I'm just saying. You can say, oh, you're an atheist, you don't believe in God. That's fine. Go right ahead. We're not stopping you from believing any of those things. What we are trying to do is stopping you from putting your degeneracy in our face. We find offense to that. We find it highly offensive in a lot of cases. Now, me, personally, I have no problem with anybody's sexual proclivities, for goodness sakes. I have no problem with none of that. Just don't put it in my face, please. I'm not going to put mine in your face. Don't put yours in my face, please. That's all I ask. And we can get along like that. We can all live happily together on this planet, for goodness sakes, as long as you don't put your degeneracy in my face, and I won't put my beliefs in your face. How about that? How about that's the resolution here? If you get offended, be offended. Sorry. Ask me nicely, I'll apologize. Sorry, didn't mean to put my beliefs on top of you. Sorry, that's it. That's all we got to do. I'm sorry, you want to talk about getting bullied and all that other nonsense? People get bullied, right? Look at me. Right? I'm a Christian conservative. I'm white, so I'm in the majority, but we're on the losing end of every argument here. It seems like, white privilege vanished a long time ago, and now we are the subjects of everybody's hatred for some reason, outside of the Jews, for goodness sakes. Let's not forget those people. Everybody hates the Jews for some reason. I don't know why. I don't understand that. Why do the Jews get so much scorn and hatred from people? I never understood that one. They are the most oppressed people on the planet. Absolutely. They are the most oppressed people on the planet. They're still getting oppressed to this day. And I just don't get it, folks. I really don't. Never understood that one. But it's just fascinating. These kids can't seem to see their own arguments here. And then what I find so funny, right, is they somehow, they just got flipped around. Like I was talking about at the beginning of this section. They somehow find themselves reluctantly on the other side of this argument, and they don't even know how they got there. Oh, well, I don't care if Christians are offended. There you go. That's how we feel. That is how we feel about your so-called bullying. When you guys put it out there on display and then expect nobody to say anything about it. Suck it up, Buttercup. That's all I got to say about that. The offense police can go away for all I care. They can just go bye-bye. You can be offended all you want. Be offended. Go ahead. We'll have these arguments till the cows come home, for crying out loud, to use an old slang term, I guess. Be offended till the cows come home. I'm loving every single minute of it. This one actually got pretty deep, and I actually love this debate here. It's pretty good. I like these guys. Cheers to them for coming on Piers Morgan and trying to make the arguments, but, they fall short. They destroyed themselves. So they completely obliterated their own arguments here. And I'm here for it, y'all. I am here for every single freaking minute of this. Loving it. But y'all do me a big favor and let me know what you think about all of this down in the comments section. I love to hear from you guys. So y'all make sure and voice your opinions, voice your offenses, whatever it may be, down in the comments section. And while you're doing that, do me another giant favor and smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you liked what you saw. And hey, look, once again, folks, we're trying to start a movement here. We're trying to push, I'm trying to get myself into this space. So y'all do me a favor. I need y'all's help. Y'all can be the ones to push me forward. Sign up, become a member, help me deliver these videos, the best possible content I can deliver to you guys. And I can promise you, I will come with the best possible content that I can make. And I will do it over and over and over again. Because I'm here for the long haul, y'all. I am definitely here for the long haul. And I definitely need the help from you guys. So y'all sign up, become a member, help me out. But in the meantime, y'all make sure and have a nice day and stay legitical. Peace.